Hello my friends, get a situation here. I'm holding the brake pedal in, sitting in the seat, the mower engage is off and it won't start. This is the electrical wiring diagram of the mower and the ignition switch which is not energizing the solenoid, the starter solenoid. Okay, the ignition switch has three safety switches in series with it that's connecting to the solenoid. So these switches have to be functioning properly. They have to be closed in order to get your voltage from your battery over to the solenoid. So this is the positive side of the battery connecting to the solenoid. The battery itself is wired directly, the negative side directly to the chassis of the mower. The starter motor also is wired directly to the chassis. The solenoid also has a wire connecting to the chassis. So these 3 points all connecting together. That's the return for the positive swing here. The solenoid itself, if you look closely, the solenoid is going to have either a 3 or a 4 terminal. They'll all be the same. The two of the terminals are very large. These connect to a large cable. That one of them, it'll be red, it'll be going directly to the battery. And the other side is of the solenoid is connecting directly to the starter motor. The two smaller terminals have small wires connected to them. The one wire is connected to a black wire connected directly to the chassis. If it's 3-pole, this one, or 3-terminal, this one will not be connected to a wire. This terminal here will be connected to the case of the solenoid, which is bolted onto the chassis of the tractor, and that's making the connection here. The other wire typically will be a white wire. That wire is connecting to the switches, which is energized with the battery. Now, the way this solenoid works is when there's power to this coil in the solenoid, it pulls a metal plunger, which then brings contact down onto the two larger terminals. This method is using a small voltage or a small current to activate this coil. When this switch is closed, it is carrying a very large current, and that's why there's a real large cable. So with a small current, you can control a very large current, which is needed for the starter motor. These 3 switches here are safety switches. The ignition switch is spring operated, so you turn the ignition switch to the on, and then there's just like in a car, then there's another position. It's the start position. It's spring operated, so that when you let go, it'll return to the start position. So when this is energized, it will keep cranking the motor until you release the switch. Then the motor will stop cranking, or starter motor. The safety switches, you have a mower engage switch. That's usually right next to the ignition switch. So on my mower, you push the switch in. When the switch is pushed in, this is closed. So that will allow the current, after the ignition switch is on, current crosses through the switch. Mower engage is engaged. It'll go to this point. The seat switch is underneath the seat. You have to be sitting on the seat to engage this switch. That'll bring the power to here. Then there is a brake safety switch. This switch is usually pretty hard to locate on the motor the mower because it's usually underneath. You have to crawl around under it to locate it, but it will be mechanically connected to the brake pedal or the brake pedal linkage, where when you press the brake pedal, it will push on the plunger of the brake switch and close this switch. That'll put power to this point, which is leading directly to your solenoid. That'll energize the solenoid, close the solenoid switch, and start your starter mower or motor. This brake switch here, I'll try to point out the location of this switch on my mower. It's hard to locate, and it would be a real hard one to get in there to replace. But any of these switches, if they were at fault, including the ignition, that could keep the starter from turning. And then again, the solenoid, if that was bad, it's definitely not going to start the starter mower. Now, I have been jump starting my mower to be able to move it, and what I'm doing is taking a screwdriver right across these two terminals, and it will throw sparks. It's throwing a high current. It will turn the motor. You have to be real careful though. You're in a tight area. If you're touching these terminals and you bump the chassis, you're going to short circuit the battery, and it's going to throw some arcs. It can damage the battery. It can warp the plates in the battery, and you have to be extremely careful when you're doing that. The other way that I jump start is going right from my positive terminal directly to the starter motor terminal. It again will throw a lot of sparks. You have to be careful that if you're touching the terminal on the starter, you don't bump the casing, which will again cause a direct short on the battery. So jump starting your mower is not a safe practice to do. You want it to find and repair the problem that exists. And the first item you should look at is the solenoid, because these often do fail. And one way to make a quick check is pull the white terminal off of your solenoid, put a voltmeter set for voltage on the white terminal, connect the negative terminal of your meter to either the chassis or the negative terminal on your battery. Then you have to sit in your mower, disengage the mower engage switch, also depress the brake pedal all the way so all these switches are closed, and then have your meter in a position where you can read it while you're sitting on the mower, and then turn your ignition switch to the start position. When you do that, you will read your battery voltage right here on your meter on that white cable. So if you're getting your power to this cable, providing the ground is connected, this should energize the solenoid. And if it's not, if you don't hear a loud clicking in there, or you using a meter here to check to see that it is making contact, that solenoid most likely is the problem, is the bad. And that's what my situation is in the mower. I'm going to change the solenoid out, and that should fix the problem. Here's the brake pedal on the mower, and the lever here, when you depress it, this rod crosses all the way to the other side of the mower. And it's hard for me to get underneath to show, but when that rod comes across, it's right in this area. Right here's the end of it. So when you depress it, it's swinging a lever up. Right in here on this chassis is a switch for the brake, which is right on the inside here. So the plunger is on the underside of the chassis at this location. Right here is the location of the starter solenoid. So it's in real close proximity to the solenoid. The solenoid is bolted right here, and there's a wire, or two wires, that are small and plugged into the solenoid. This white one here is the power. That is the one that should energize the solenoid. So we're going to test it and see if there's power running there. Okay, what I'm going to do is take my voltmeter and I'm going to take this to DC volts, and I'm going to use 25 volt scale. The lower one is 10 volt. So we're dealing with 12 volt battery. So we're going to test the battery, and minus to minus, plus to plus, and right there you can see 12 volt. So good battery. Now we need to set this right there. We got our meter plugged in to the switching terminal for the solenoid, and I'm going to set the meter where I can monitor it right there. I'm going to get on the tractor, hold my minus to minus, engage the brake. I'm on the seat, and right there we have voltage. So that solenoid should be kicking in. So we're going to swap the solenoid out. Here's the new solenoid. I got it for about $8. It was inspected. It should be working. This is a used one, so it was a lot cheaper than a new one. Alright, now the solenoid, this is the one that's in there. There's a clip on one side, bolt on the other, two terminals. These connect to the battery cable. That's this hefty one, and it's going right to the starter motor. The other, that's one side connects to that. The other side comes right up and it goes to the positive terminal on the battery. Okay, these two terminals are the switch. Now, most solenoids will be similar. They'll either have 4 terminals or 3 terminals. If it's 3 terminals, the one terminal will be grounded to the case. In this case, mine has a black wire, which will be the ground. It'll go to this one, and the ignition switch through the safety switches will put power here. And when this is energized, it pulls a bar, a magnet pulls a bar across these two terminals, and that allows you to switch a high current. So a low current here will switch a high current there. So let's go and swap this out. You can see right here, that's one and that's the other. So I'm going to take that out and swap it. Now, anytime you're working on an electrical system on a mower or a car or whatever, you want to take the battery out of the circuit. So what I always do is take the ground off first, and I do this routinely because if you have your wrench on the negative terminal and by chance you hit the chassis, you're going to throw an arc if you were on the positive terminal, and that would cause a real high current flow. It could damage your battery, and so it's a safe practice to remove the ground first. Even if you're installing or removing a battery, take that one off first, then you can do the positive. Now that that's disconnected, if this by chance does hit the chassis, there won't be an electrical connection. Okay, now I can take the solenoid out. Here you can see the solenoid. Here's where the white wire was connected. Okay, here's the black wire, and you can see the heavy terminals. Okay, this one is going to the starter. This one here is the heavy cable is going to my battery. This other red cable is going up to the ignition switch, and that's the one Okay, this is the one that provides power to this terminal. Okay, now let's get it out of the circuit. Well, everything's connected, and let's disengage the engage the brake. Mower's off. Try it. Thanks for watching, my friends. Bye-bye.